Yeah.
some religious freedom bill where essentially it gives businesses the legal protections to discriminate based on like any religious beliefs they have.
Hmm.
And that when that passed, it we literally lost like two conventions in our national um our state capital has like a ton of big conventions like that. That's one of their biggest industries. And we used to have the Pokemon national championships in our city, in our state capital, and we just lost it because of that bill, and we almost lost the number one employer of the state. Basically, uh, the governor had to walk back some of the more extreme revisions of the bill simply because the largest employer of the state threatened to completely withdraw from the state unless something changed.
Hmm.
That just shows the power of capitalism is money. It's not the ideology, it's the money.
It's true. And like I do have to reiterate, like, it matters getting involved on a state level. Like, it matters so much, because you're right. Like, the local and state level is where like most politics happen. Like, there's a reason why Minnesota has been consistently kind of like this left-leaning bastion in the Midwest, and it's because people have gotten involved on the state and local level, and like are pretty consistent in being left-wing allies. This is why we get uh, gay marriage and abortion rights, and like all these key pivotal rights protected. I mean, like, Minnesota, because people get involved in Minnesota, because it has kind of this different culture of getting involved in politics. Um, like, we had trans protections in 1993. Like, we've had like legal protections for transgender people for 30 years now.
That's very fascinating. Um, that's something that we can basically only dream of. Uh, uh, we uh, we're not exactly doing very well with the super majority Republican state legislator. Um, and I think that's something that I've been also pushing. Like I actually was at the national DSA convention this year. I was able to luckily go. And something I was telling all the other like chapters and like breakout meetings that different uh, regions were talking, I said, look, our state Republicans are like more reactionary than Florida's. If the Democrats in the city try to do the most minor change, the Republicans will put forward a bill to preempt that change so that cities are no longer allowed to do that. To
That
put out how petty that is, how petty they are. Um, we've had a wave of pedestrian deaths that's been really causing trouble in the city, and the city was passing a ban on in certain downtown areas where you can't turn right on a red light. This is just a simple sign that you would put up to say you can't turn right on a red light, even if there's no traffic. Um, and then the state legislator tried to ban it, ban traffic signs in the city.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's essentially how extremely reactionary the Republicans are. Luckily, they couldn't get the support for it, and also it was like right as the state legislature was about to end session, from what I remember, so they didn't get that passed. But like, there was so for anyone who's not familiar with the shape of Indiana, like Indianapolis, the state capital, is in the dead center of the state, like literally exactly in the center. And then when we have our like the called the donut counties that surround the Indianapolis County,
Hmm.
and there was an actual agreement to put like actual light rail all across the center county and the surrounding county and the northern surrounding counties. And then Republican state legislator came in and said, "You're not put the preemption law that says you're not allowed to build light rail in central Indiana."
That's crazy.
And that's the type of power that we have been. that I've been pushing. I told other people at the convention, I said, if you think that your Republican state legislator hasn't caught on to this strategy that ours is doing, because from what I've seen, not every red state is doing this yet. Um, and they will start doing it. So if you want your city to make any sort of change, you need to have at least a split legislator.
Yeah, I like it's and I guess kind of circling this back around to doomerism. It sounds like what you're kind of saying is you find hope in the fact that these smaller battles mean like so much more, or at least in different ways, maybe to like average life in your area. Is that
Yeah,
kind of it?
yeah, and one thing that I like to remember is like Indiana may like be viewed as a red state regarding the rest of the country, like especially coastal people who are like Indiana, that redneck state. This is the state where socialism was literally born in America. Eugene Debs is from Terre Haute, Indiana. His house is literally a museum of like the social of his life in the Socialist Party. I haven't. I'm shocked I haven't been to visit yet, but it's like it's a very red state depending on what color red you're talking about. If you're talking about Republican red, or you're talking about socialism red. And I was just talking to another comrade of mine about how he was talking to like how he used to talk to the rural voters where he grew up, who were like 100% onto ACAB. Like they were full on board to ACAB because it's just because the cops would harass the local junkie and shake them down for money, and this junkie could be their kid or their friend's kid,
Yeah.
and that it's just the fact that everyday politics affects everywhere. And if you just get on the level of talking to some of these voters, you can change more minds than you think in more places. Because I think there's a very much a disconnect, at least in Indiana, regarding rural communities. Rural communities just generally have an information problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're so isolated, and the fact that the only information that gets there is extremely slow internet or literally just Fox News, because like cable TV, some of them don't like even have MSNBC anymore.
Yeah.
The like really, really lame basic packages to get to these rural areas. And it's really just like I see that what's that guy's name who sung Richmond, North of Richmond?
Oh, I don't remember.
But, like, people were s I was watching streamers covering him, and they were, like, so confused about his ideology. I'm like, I probably could have talked to that voter if we went out to the rural areas and did some voter canvassing. Sounds like someone that would be in for my state. He's just low information, but, you know, he's got the general hatred of establishment rich people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot more commonality on the local level. Like there's a lot more overlap because people have kind of maybe like a shared material interest when it's a more local issue. You know, like um, if the issue is like clean water, you know, Republican residents and Democratic residents both want to have clean water to drink. You know.
Yeah, and even that's the really funny thing is we had a candidate who was running we had a So I forgot to mention we ran two other city council candidates in Central Indiana, and for the general, because the third one that we had endorsed didn't have they weren't going to lose to a libertarian in the general, and they didn't. But we had one of our general election candidates ran in a heavy Republican district, and we just put out a bunch of people power, and we had people who were going in to vote for the Republican mayor candidate who was basically uh, he was like a character. He was like a caricature of like uh it's hard to explain without knowing Indiana politics, but he was
Yeah.
just he was you could clearly tell he was full of BS, but he people would go in, they say, "Yeah, I'm voting for Shreve," and like, "Who you're voting for city council?" "Oh, I'm voting for this guy." I'm like, "That's the socialist." So like just talking to these normal voters and I know, like, in this community, we're all online, we follow news closely. Most voters don't vote based on, like, ideology. They generally don't have one. They
Mhm.
generally want they want safe streets. They don't wanna basically be, well, freaking murdered on the street, and that's part of the crime fear, but part of the part of the gun control fear as well. And then they just wanna have, they wanna make it in at the end of the day. Most people do not care about interfighting politics or partisan drama. They just
Mhm.
care about getting through the end of the day, going home, watching Netflix, and, drinking a Bud Light or something.
Yeah. So, like, when you say most people don't have politics, do you mean like they just aren't really aware or thinking about like their political position?
Um, People generally tend to hold strong beliefs in a couple things, and I'm not saying you can get every voter. I'm saying that most people who even I'd say maybe I dep like, I don't know, politics is so dependent on state that in Indiana, you have Republicans who just don't get reached out to by the Democratic Party. Like, these are people who wanna tax the rich, these are people who are like I said, there are rural voters who are Republicans that are totally on board with ACAB.
Yeah.
These are people who want, in some cases, simple gun control, because there's too much gun violence, or demilitarizing the police. But there's just such a shell of a former Democratic Party in states like Indiana, to where they literally have people come in to the party and have a full 92 county strategy planned. And then they get backstabbed by the party leadership because they don't want to put the effort into actually putting that into action.
Gotcha. So, when you say you do political organizing, what does that look like for you? Like, what is you doing political organizing look like?
It is it's basically just talking to people, and there's various different types of political organizing. Um, for an example, if you're just going into DSA and going to join into a DSA meeting, it's just talking to people, getting to know them, and seeing, like, what can I help you with? These are my ideas. Let's see how we get it done. It's just talking to people. Organizing is just simply talking to people. If you can organize your neighbors for a neighborhood grill out block party, you can organize your workplace, you can organize for an election. It's just, just talking to people. And there's even things that, like I've mentioned before, you don't have to give like a barnstorm speech to get a hold of good organizing. It's uh, it's like networking. It's part of it is like the type of networking in politics you do, knowing who's in your chapter leadership that can get things done. But
Yeah.
branching off into like electoral organizing, um, as I'm in leadership regarding election stuff for my chapter. There's a lot of different like tech backend stuff that I've mostly handled because I'm neurodivergent, and sometimes it is hard for me to get out and directly talk to voters. Um, but there's various types of electoral just volunteering you can do for your local chapter. There's tools, like I mentioned, National comes up with tools like there's something called a dialer,
Hmm.
and it's simply you sit at a computer, you bring up a web browser with the link they send you, you sit with your like headset, your microphone or whatever, or you can even use your cell phone, and you just read a script out to people and click buttons. You don't have to like be looking at people direct face to face if you don't feel comfortable going out on canvas. Like maybe they're asking for you to canvass in like more Republican suburbanite district that you don't feel safe in because maybe you don't feel like you're passing enough, or maybe you're a minority. We do have people who did phone banking because they were minorities, and we had a candidate in a suburbanite district. And there's even like one person who didn't even do any like phone banking or canvassing or anything. He just ran the data for the campaign, and that was a huge time saver because it essentially took out the entire tech back end of things. It was just by this one guy, and he didn't even have to touch it. He didn't even have to talk to a single voter.
That's crazy. Like, that's wild. So, if other people were watching and you wanted to convince them to get involved with DSA or some other local political endeavor, what would you suggest they do? Like, what map out their journey?
First thing I ask them is generally like, what are your top 3 or 5 issues? Um, and you also got to spell out like, what does the state legislator look like in your state? Like, do you have a base Michigan or Minnesota legislator? Do you have an all Republican in like Florida or Tennessee, or do you have like a establishment neoliberal party like New York or California?
Mm-hmm.
This is the type of thing where you want to talk to people who may know more, and these people will be in your chapter. At least, like if you're coming in with no knowledge of how the state party works, generally, if your chapter has an electoral project, the person leading it should have like at least basic knowledge of things on it. Like I said, we're lucky enough to have another leader who knows in very deep politics of the Indiana Democrats, including who's sleeping with who.
Yeah. Oh god.
And let me go a little bit more on on the going into things. Maybe your workplace is maybe your workplace is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, me and my wife, we went to the pharmacy, and they're literally told us we're working unpaid days here. So
Oh
they're
god.
working unpaid days, and like I told other people in our chat, I'm like, that's illegal. I'm like, yeah, it is. So, like if you deal with a nightmare workplace scenario, going to like a DSA meeting and talking to whoever's like leading labor stuff or whoever's the co-chair of the labor committee in your local chapter, then they would be able to say, "Oh, let me get you in contact with like this union people, and they can train you." Or like for instance, National tends to have either large organizing training conventions. There's a thing called Labor Notes that is essentially all about labor organizing. It's what DSA does that. There's also just like general trainings that chapters can bring forward. Like anyone can request a training session with National, and it's 100% free for the chapter because it's a national resource. And that's just like the start of things. Like there's things like LGBTQ solidarity. Like we got
Yeah.
people in other chapters who are literally like running security, not security, but like running solidarity so people can transition safely.
That's really wonderful. So it sounds like there's like a lot of things people can actually accomplish when they are getting involved in this way. It sounds like kind of you have like an inherent solution to doomerism, right? When you approach folks, because you can basically be like, "Hey, you can actually fix these issues."
Yeah, I think it's Gandhi who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." No person fights alone. So you don't want to be a little lost person in your city. Like you may be trans or non-binary or queer in a heavy Republican like shut city or suburban town or whatever. Um, and you're afraid to like be in the community, but you also want to organize. DSA is a place where you can come and be safe there. DSA is literally like the biggest like LGBTQ organization, I'd argue, at least political org, because from what I heard, and I don't know how official the survey was, but like over 20% of DSA is identifies as LGBTQ, and most of them are like youngins. Like for our chapter leadership being like in their 30s and 40s, that is like old for leadership.
Yeah. Like, okay, and this is maybe difficult. When you look at like 2024 and like a national election, what is kind of your mental calculus? What is the role of DSA in like a national sense for a presidential election?
My sense is, I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. If your first DSA meeting you go to is trying to pitch supporting Biden, you're gonna like get like laughed at. This is a socialist organization. That doesn't mean you can't like vote for Biden and say, hey, are you gonna vote? But you're not gonna get like a DSA endorsement from Biden. We do take pride in having like strong progressive and socialist candidates for endorsement because endorsements mean something as a
Yeah.
democratic socialist. But there's nothing saying you can't advocate for voting, and it's just part of that. Something I like to say is Obama's 50 state strategy in 2008 was one of the biggest successes for the Democratic parties that I can even imagine. Um, he he ran strong campaigns in almost every state. And that not only won a bunch of Senate seats, that flipped states like Indiana to the Democrats. And something I have heard from people is like the Democrats have never even tried to be remotely as strong as Obama's 2008 campaign was here. And that's just proof that um, just strong organizing willpower can do things.
Can
And
for people who don't know about Obama's 50 state campaign, can you just kind of go over like what made that so groundbreaking?
It made it groundbreaking. It's a few things. The first one is people really like hated Bush. Like this was for like the Zoomers in the chat. Which by the way, if anyone has questions, ask Jack because
Yes.
I'm not reading chat.
Yeah, we we
uh,
we will take questions. So if you do have questions, please just at me in the chats. I'll relay them to gamergy.
yeah. Essentially, what was the question again?
Like, what made Obama's 2008
Oh,
50 state strategy so groundbreaking?
yeah, so I haven't done a full deep dive into it because usually when I do research, I go like deep into these things. But from what I heard, is essentially Obama didn't treat states as red or blue, at least
Hmm.
in 2008. He completely abandoned that the second he got into office. He just abandoned his volunteer team, which is why he lost so badly in 2010. Um, but the 2008 campaign was a combination of a national Democratic Party that was united on getting as many seats as possible and like not counting out certain states as lost. And then just the sheer hatred of Bush, both being tired of the Iraq War and the financial crisis that just started in the election year. And also the third thing is Obama ran on a pretty strong progressive vision in that 2008 campaign. And those three things uh, really Obama led the top to the Dems to get 60 seats at least for a couple months before Ted Kennedy died. And the last thing I'll mention on that is in 2008, I mentioned we have not Republicans, we have governor races in the same year as a presidential election. We had a Republican candidate for governor who won overwhelmingly in 2008, and Obama won overwhelmingly in 2008. They were called Mitch Obama voters. Mitch is the governor at the time. He was like a moderate like Republican, but like his campaign was like actively getting votes. But so was Obama's,
Hmm.
and that's the thing is you get organizations and people out to talk to voters and share a progressive vision, and they'll buy onto it. Like you look at all the polls, and when single issues go out, like legalize marijuana or abortion, they overwhelmingly win. And the reason that, well, part of the reason that you get all these Republican majorities that Democrats aren't, because frankly the Democrats aren't even trying to do it. And there's some states, like I said, I can only speak for Indiana, but the Democratic Party is just in some states just so depressed and has no vision. That not only is it like just leaving the minorities and the oppressed communities to the wolves, it's, and the silver lining part, it's leaving a wide open spot for an organization like DSA to infiltrate and take over the establishment wings of the levers of power in the state legislature.
Yeah, like I'm just really appreciative of you taking the time to like come and discuss this with me and like with everyone in the audience too. Like I think a lot of people don't actually know how political organizing happens. They just see kind of the end result of it. And that can look really overwhelming when it's like, the political organizing of like the Democratic Party, and all of the money and people they're able to throw into kind of this effort to push a candidate, right? And that is, I think, daunting for a lot of people. Like they see that and they just give up when we all have, the power to get involved in this organizing process and seize back power in our local and state communities. And that once we start building power locally, it gets easier to build power in a larger sense. And like we have more power than kind of these oppressive systems want us to know about.
Yeah, it's really just that simple, that we have the people power and we have the ideas. Hard to quote Dave Rubin, we have ideas on our side. Um, and it's just getting the ideas out to the people and showing that we care. And your state Democratic Party may be more depressing than the National Democratic Party. But the good news is, if they're like the Indiana Democrats, it means they're weaker and easier to outmaneuver. For instance, like I was saying with city council, the candidate was like completely shocked. They had no expectation that their challenger would get anywhere. Um, and it was really like a dozen dedicated canvassers and phone bankers nailing out a few months of constant voter outreach multiple times a week and getting city council race flipped. And our candidate, also won overwhelmingly. Like he won like 60% of the primary vote.
Yeah. Um, Chatters, do you have questions? Also, Poigrester, please stop being incredibly sussy in my chat in a not fun way.
Oh,
Let's see.
oh, I can. In the meantime, I can spill some really tr- basically I can give some advice on how to deal with, like, because general political organizing, you are going to deal with like heavy disagreements and forks in the road or like roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like these are some of the biggest things that you need to learn early, or you'll run into issues where I had in the chapter when I first joined. About like a few months out, we had this big instigated blow up thing that like 90% of the chapter stopped coming, and we had
Oh
to
snap!
rebuild from scratch. And
Is
it's
is
just been,
is that like kind of the result of like factionalization within like your chapter?
it's, see, I wasn't fully privy to all the conversations, but it was a lot of more unserious people um, using DSA as more of like a social club than actually wanting to get things done. And when people
Mm.
who wanted to get things done came to the chapter and started advocating for it, the people who wanted to be a social club essentially threw a fit and left.
Yeah, I think that is something that political organizing tends to get misconstrued as, because you can make friends while reaching out to voters, while knocking on doors, while calling people up and phone banking together. Like you can that's an environment where people make friends. But like when it comes down to it, the primary purpose of what you're doing is not to make friends and have like a friend group. The primary purpose is to make changes in politics and see like actual realizations on those goals. And there are some people who prioritize um, making friends when the reality is you just need to be able to work with people for a common goal, and those people might not be your friends. They might not be people you like want to hang out with all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way trying to get a college friend into DSA. Didn't end up well. But yeah, the type of people who are doing organizing are not necessarily the type of people who you're gonna uh, be friends with, and like people you do organize with, like Progressive Victory. I know you would like work with Destiny, and uh, I cannot imagine. There's certain political disagreements I have with people that I have worked with regarding like you and Vosh and whoever else is involved with Progressive Victory. But there is an important point of coalition building. Coalition building is knowing that don't let the perfect be in the enemy of the good, and that um, if a partner org will like help you get your goals in place, there's no reason not to work with them. And you don't you don't get things done in politics without coalitions. That's why like you had the Fred Hampton Rainbow Coalition idea. It was so powerful. And then that's where you get things uh like that's where you get like real organizing is done. Like you if you're in DSA, you don't only need to be talking to DSA people. If you're in DSA, you need to be talking to the people in Progressive Victory. You need to be talking to the people in your local voters organization. You need to be talking to folks in All Revolution. You need to be talking to like PSL, which is PSL is like the it's called Party for Socialism Liberation. They're a Marxist group, but we work with them on things, and that's
Yeah.
because we agree on a lot of things, and we'll help with them with like labor or protests. And it's like I said, like there are like severe problems some of us has regarding PSL, but they're allies in a coalition that we understand is imperfect.
Yeah, and no coalition is ever going to be perfect, right? Like there's like that saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of good. And often in politics it's like we aren't going to ever get a perfect like solution. We aren't ever going to get even like a super amazing solution, generally speaking. But sometimes we need a good enough solution, you know?
Yeah, and that's exactly what like that's what the New Deal was. Like people praise the New Deal as being some revolutionary fever. It was really a big compromise. Unfortunately, some of the compromise had to be doing leaving Black Americans out of the New Deal to please the Southern Democrats and the New Deal era. But um, there are politics is a game of compromise, and if you run on the ideology of refusal to compromise, you are going to get nowhere. I'm
Yeah.
just like being perfectly honest. You're gonna have to make concessions. You're gonna have to cut deals. Like that's the thing. Like the Vosh debate that you were watching a couple nights ago.
Mm-hmm.
The point of they kept saying do the Johnson treatment, do the Johnson treatment. Johnson did those unconventional meetings, like where he was on in the bathroom or like standing like nose to nose with another senator. And the thing is, in those talks, he wasn't saying, "I'm going to break your kneecaps." He was saying, "You going to take the steel? What do you need from me? I need this from you. What are you going to do for me? I can do this for you." And it's that sort of wheeling and dealing of politics that isn't 100% related to like just legislative and Congress, but that's the sort of compromising stuff and deal making that is fundamental to all sorts of politics.
Yeah, and I think there is a level of pragmatism people need to in order to engage with our political system, because it is based on having to interact with people who have very different ideals from you, and finding common ground and um making that case and being able to advocate for um something that is better that might not be your ideal. And there are a lot of people who find that objectionable to a level and a degree I cannot articulate. um, but it is like, at the end of the day, politics is about making things better, and sometimes you don't get much better. You know?
And that's the thing is sometimes things get worse before it gets better, as we're currently seeing with like, SCOTUS and the Trump judges and all that. But there's a quote by MLK that I like to use. The arc of moral history is long, but it bends towards justice. And I personally feel that arc only the bend towards justice is held up by the work that people are doing. And if we're not doing the work, the nonstop work to make things better, then things just aren't going to be better.
Yeah.
And something that, if you look historically back to like the post New Deal, like when the New Deal coalition broke up in the 70s on the Democrats, the left completely abandoned electoral politics until like 2016 is when like the actual like left socialists fully went on board into electoral politics. And
Yeah.
see, that's where you get like the Clintons and the Kerrys and the Gores running
Yeah.
bad campaigns.
Well, it was when socialists started sitting out electoral politics, that's when we got the major shift to neoliberalism from Democrats. And like, that has had such far-ranging implications and horrific consequences that I hope we've learned our lesson, like, collectively. um
Yeah,
we can't afford to sit out elections like this. We can't afford to play like weird games of political chicken. Like, we have to be involved and we have to be doing what we can. And yeah. So someone in chat is saying that their local DSA is more of like a social club. What what should someone do if, like, they want to join like their local chapter and they find that it is kind of in that way, that it's not terribly interested in actually improving things?
okay. So whoever said that, just gonna give like a 3-second pause to like bring out a notepad app or something, because I can give like a full step process of how you can go about this.
Dylan,
Um,
Dylan, there you go. That's your cue to get out the notepad.
yeah. Essentially, what you want to do first is read the bylaws of the chapter. And what you want to specifically look for are two things: how to form committees and how committees work, and proposals. Um, I did- I think it was we got cut off last time when I started talking
Yeah.
about proposals. But proposals are essentially policy change or direction shift in the chapter, and that the chapter, if voted majority, is like whatever the proposal is includes in the wording is supposed to uphold. Um, and I mean, all you have to do is look at what happened this spring. It was right after we won the primary election. We had people coming out and saying, "I want to form this LGBTQ solidarity committee." Um, we had people coming out to. There were like a couple people who wanted to do it, there wasn't full buy-in from the chapter. There was like no current urge to do that. Um, but they came in there, they wrote a proposal together, and Dylan or whoever was saying that, I'm gamergy on Discord. I can literally send you a proposal template that our chapter has. So if you need a template to start writing stuff, hit me up. But it's you basically bring a proposal to whatever the general meeting is that they pass these at. You may not get a majority vote, but the one of the things you do need to know regarding getting proposals passed is simple Robert's Rules of Order. I mostly just learned that through experience in the chapter, uh, but that's like governing structure procedure. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Like if you ask your co-chair of your chapter who what Robert's Rules of Orders are, and they can't even define it, that's a problem. Because yeah, basically, what you want to do is you want to know how to form committees and form one with the proposal if you want to work on it, and then write the proposal together, and then bring it to a general meeting. Usually, they like kind of want you to like give them a notice so that they can put it on what's called the agenda. I know, ooh, agenda, but it's just basically like the agenda for what's going to happen at the meeting. People don't like to be blindsided by things. Frankly, coming blindsided with a brand new committee, if you're brand new to the DSA, uh, it's not going to like cause drama or anything, but people may be like a little surprised um, given that. But basically, you just want to sometimes you gotta like butt heads with people too. There are people who me and a couple others have been butting heads with lately because they don't want to put in the effort. Um, and there's I could go into the deep depths of how you can like politically maneuver to like recall people who are absolutely not doing leadership jobs or in potentially filling positions. That's something you just have to gain with experience and like watching politics happen. Honestly, just watch, if you want to know about Robert's Rules of Order, watch C-SPAN for like 3 hours. At least committee hearings on C-SPAN, you'll see them say things like motion to do this or second or I yield my time or something. And then you can just Google what they're saying, and then you kind of understand how process of democracy works.
Yeah, it's kind of like learning legal speak. It's kind of like its own language for our unique bureaucracy.
Yeah, there's a actually I think you would actually like this, Jack. But there's a game on what is it? The itch platform called Rules and Roberts. It's just D&D, but learning Robert's Rules of Order.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, part of let me see if I can drop it. I'm gonna drop it in the GG chat. We
Do it.
found it. Yeah, it's free and you can donate to them, but it's essentially learning how to
Rules
navigate
and
rules.
Roberts.
Yeah, it's one thing that we're trying to pick up in our chapter is doing like training sessions on things because we're really at the point with our chapter where we can start building up like new leadership that we've been trying to do for a while. Part of that is to have like quarterly trainings, and we're gonna literally do like a Rules and Roberts like campaign for a whole day on one of these trainings.
That's so fun.
And like political organizing doesn't always have to be boring. I mean, there are like we've until like elections like really picked up and went full steam, we were having monthly like outings at the local DSA bar, like and your chat sometimes it can be
Yeah.
socialist socializing. It's in the
What?
name. Yeah,
That's
it's political organizing doesn't have to be boring, but it's also not necessarily fun.
yeah.
And honestly, one thing that gets people out to meetings is we have free coffee and donuts every meeting.
Ooh. I mean, honestly, that'll get a lot of people. Free food and coffee.
Yeah, that's really like we were talking about to people like, how do we get more people out to say free food? That's it.
It's true. It's true.
And that's like where you get like the old water cooler talk that they talked about. Like that's how union organizing used to happen. It's just talking randomly to your organizer. Like we were me and some folks at the chapter were picketing for Starbucks workers. And we just ran into a random guy who we were talking to and like handing out stuff for Starbucks unions. And he was telling us about like stories of like corruption that a Walmart like he didn't say because he didn't want to accuse anything, but he's like, "Did you look into what that Walmart in that town burnt down? You notice how like no one got hurt and how they had state of the art fire protection, but it
Oh,
still
great.
burned down."
Yeah.
And like apparently he sued multiple companies successfully, and the only reason they didn't get criminally prosecuted was because he was not like a prosecutor, but he won the case.
Oh.
So it's just really like meeting people. You just political organizing can be fun and just starting those conversations. And if you're doing things like canvassing and phone banking, your time is limited, so you're not gonna chat for 3 hours, but you do have friendly conversations with people. And there are incidents like when you're phone banking, people will hang up on you and it may feel bad. But I guarantee you, when you have that conversation with someone like I was like when I was phone banking for one of our candidates, I talked to a guy who didn't even know there was an election happening,
Oh no.
and like he sounded totally stoned.
I mean,
S
I feel like that also kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with DSA.
Yeah, but like I was just talking to the guy on the phone, like, yeah, there's election coming up. You like this sort of policy? What are we trying to look in the city? And you just kind of get a feel like what they want in the city. And something that I also like to say is like you saw the case of that person who like got shot pulling up to someone's driveway.
Yeah.
Um, there's no fear of that, for 2 reasons. One, because people who are not or who are gonna be rude to you just aren't gonna answer their door. And 2, the ways that people get, like, specifically doors you're gonna canvass and phones you're gonna call, they're not gonna be Republicans. This is, like, Democratic Party or, like, progressive Dem organization data that you're getting, so they either voted Dem recently or historically were a Dem.
That's really that's really good. It seems like the DSA is really good at doing outreach. And I'm wondering like how much do you like how much door like do you do a lot of door knocking like or are you kind of now at a point where you're overseeing like the people who are going door to door?
Um,
I
I'm
know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but
No, that's fine. That makes sense. I've more or less been picking up more and more like tech stuff on the back end that never got going. Just general chapter work. So I'm like running at a million miles an hour half the time. You don't have to do that. You can just do one thing. You only have to if you just want to do elections work or you just want to do late work. Any help is any help. But like for me personally, like I'm doing 3 different back-end tech stuff. I was the one who completely revived our social media after it had been dead forever. And I did that social media reviving by putting a proposal together with new guidelines of who can post on social media. Because, at the time we had people who weren't sure what to post, and I came up with a solution for that and put it into place. And that's the type of like initiative that showing that at your chapter will get you 99% of the time positive feedback. If it's your state Democratic Party, like the Indiana Democrats, you're going to get negative feedback.
uh
but
yeah.
but DSA, any help is good help. And I'm sorry, I kind of lost the question you were in.
I was just curious about how much you actually like do like door knocking, phone banking,
Oh,
etc. or if you've
Yeah.
kind of like moved to like more you're overseeing those activities.
Yeah, so essentially I do a lot of the when you have to set up phone bankings. Like you have to set up phone bankings for candidates and campaigns. Like right now there's no elections happening. We're just looking at candidates to potentially endorse. For instance, what I'm doing now, for example, we have been building a broader coalition of like progressive left and socialist groups, um, at least progressive Dem groups, or and left of that. And I've been spending my time this past week scheduling phone calls with leaders of these orgs that we have at least worked in within the past or want to work with, and setting up calls and essentially saying like, hey, we need this, we're looking at this numbers of data because our other elections guy ran all the numbers of how many volunteers we need and for how much time. And I'm when my goal is I'm reaching out to these orgs and like, hey, what kind of like what's called, we call it bandwidth, can you provide? What kind of capacity can you provide? How much support can your org go and